Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Sir Stephen Wilkinson. Sir Stephen Wilkinson is the founder and managing director of Good and Prosper Limited. He's a member of the board of experts of the Birthing Giants Fellowship Program and a founding member of the Small Giants member community. Stephen, it's an honor to be on the screen with you today. We met through the Birthing of Giants program. I'm surprised we didn't meet through Small Giants. I guess about a year, maybe.
Or through Norm, or through drinking on Wednesday afternoons.
Isn't that where all, maybe not all, but many good things start
Absolutely.
to happen? Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us. Stephen, tell us a little bit about your background so that everybody can understand the perspective from which you're coming from.
Yeah, the very potted version is I'm an Englishman who studied medieval German literature at university, and then I took a job with an American investment bank in the mid-1980s as a rookie, and went to work for them in Germany. This was in the time after Big Bang, with no real understanding of finance, but it felt that it might be something that would be useful to learn. And I had no other options, so I took that one. And I've basically been in finance in one form or another for the past 32 years. So that's been my home. I come from a business background, sort of medium-sized family business that went public in the 1950s. And so I've sort of grown up in a business environment. But as somebody who was obviously more literary minded than business minded in early days, and I think my value proposition or my career has been based on acting as an emissary between the world of small, medium-sized businesses and finance, and sort of acting as a translator and interpreter between those two very different worlds. And I found that an aptitude for storytelling and understanding that numbers tell stories has been a useful way of building a career as both an investor and an advisor to small, medium-sized businesses in that space. Yeah. So that's basically where I come from.
That connection of numbers and finance, and well, there's numbers are one thing, but also finance and capital, and having a small or having a mid-sized business I think is one of the cornerstones of the Birthing Giants program, and which you, at least the sessions I've been to, you lead up. I have an accounting background. As we've talked about, I get that part, although the capital markets thing and thinking about capital markets, I thought was an eye-opener for me, and certainly an eye-opener for everybody else in the room, and quite powerful, because to the extent somebody wants to exit, thinking about that well in advance and understanding the mechanism of how that can work and the valuations can make a huge difference.
Well, that it absolutely can, and I think the idea that is strange to most entrepreneurs, that they're doing two things when they're setting up a business. Number one, they are creating an organization to deliver the value of whatever it is that the business is supposed to be doing, or solving the particular problem with technology or service or something. But they are also creating a product. They're creating a capital market product, and there are buyers who know how to evaluate the product that they're creating. And unless they are intending to hand over that product to the next generation, which, quite frankly, most people don't nowadays, but they also don't think about what they're going to do with it at a particular point in the future. They just don't think about it because it exists and they're inside it, and you can't read the label from inside the jar. You just can't. So you need people to sort of take you out of the jar and say, this is actually what you're building.
Yeah.
And let's, if you want to, think about how do you make the best version of the product that you are also creating? And effectively, that's, you're moving from an operating to an investing perspective, which is sort of at the top of the capitalist value chain.
Right, right, and a big part of what I think the Birthing and Gathering of Giants program does for business owners. You also tell us a little bit about you invest in businesses as well. Tell us a little bit about that. And
yeah, well, I think it didn't take me very long, sort of maybe after 5 or 6 years of working for other people, that I realized that actually I was genetically unemployable. And I had this idea that I really always wanted to run my own balance sheet. That's how I phrased it, 25 years ago. I wanted to run my own balance sheet. I wanted to be responsible for the creative process of, I suppose you would call it allocating capital, but making decisions from a balance sheet. And because I can't run a business to save my life, and the maximum number of employees that I can deal with is about 3, I wanted to find a way that I could leverage brain power and sort of get on the, or hook myself to people who really could run businesses, and investing is a really good way to do that. If you know what you're doing. And I trained in investment, so I understood the basics, and I was very lucky. Maybe it was luck, I don't know, but one of the very first influences was, in fact, on the very first or second day of working in finance, my buddy who was next to me, with whom I was sharing a Reuters terminal, said, "Do you want to know what the most expensive share on the New York Stock Exchange is?" And I said, "Go on, show me." I don't know any of them, so you may as well show me this one. And then Berkshire Hathaway, he showed me BRK.A, and at the time it was trading at $2,000, beginning in 1985. Beginning in 1987. And I thought that was interesting, because not because I had ever heard of Buffett or knew what Berkshire Hathaway was, but because a week earlier I'd bought a Kirby vacuum cleaner from a door-to-door salesman who'd arrived at our door sort of a week after we landed in Munich, and we bought one, and it was an expensive purchase. And I thought, I didn't realize there were people still going around door to door selling vacuum cleaners. I thought that was something from the 1950s. So I perked my ears up, and sort of, when I read this, and thought, oh, I know that company. I bought products of theirs. Went into the library, pull out the last annual report, because I thought that's what you did, and was fascinated. And I was fascinated by the easy way in which Buffett was writing his letters, and that led me straight on to discovering Benjamin Graham. So the first book that I read sort of as in investment world was Benjamin Graham's work. And once you're on that track, either it resonates with you or it doesn't. And I realized I want to do that. And so that's more or less what I've been doing in one way or another for the last 20 couple of years.
Gotcha. And you're obviously advising businesses through the program. And
well, that happened during the pandemic. I'd never really saw myself as an advisor in any way. I've been on a number of boards of public companies, mostly companies that we had some sort of investment in, usually minorities up to 30%. After 30%, I would have, if I'd have moved over 30%, I would have had to offer
minority stakes
for the whole company. So we never did that. So we was always sort of hanging around at 29.9% as the maximum, often with a board seat. And I got bored of board seats. Possibly bored is the wrong word, but I found that the risk-reward relationship of being a public company director was being massively skewed towards risk, and I couldn't really see the point. And I don't really like, I prefer to own things and have my own and not be answerable to anybody. I prefer that. So I stopped, but during the pandemic, in March, I started doing two things that have effectively ended up in Good and Prosper, one of which is writing and publishing, which I do quite a lot of. I'd always wanted to do that, and I sort of kept giving myself excuses, but I didn't have any excuses, as none of us did, if we wanted to do something different during the pandemic. So I started, and I'm very glad that I did do that. And the other thing was I was asked just to consult, just advise people that I had no idea how to do that. Nothing to us. So I, just had chats on the telephone, and then people say, "Well, let me hire you." And I said, "Well, I don't know, I don't know how that works. I don't know how to charge." So I had to make something up, and I found I really enjoyed that, and I wish I'd done it earlier. Not having sort of capital responsibility, but being able to use experience from, I don't know, 25 years in business, or 30 even, and using a financial experts or investors' perspective to advise business people, again, sort of taking them out of the tin and looking at their business from the outside. I found that was something that I was good at,
and has a lot of value.
And has an extraordinary amount of value if it's done properly. Yeah, and I have to say, I love it. My wife has been telling me for ages I should do it, and I thought, no, I can't do that. It's not a real job doing that. But I'm finding that it is actually, and that you can add a great deal of value by doing it. Yeah. So that's what Good and Prosper does. I do the publishing. I'm sort of evolving that into its own little publishing business, and I have a very healthy consulting and advisory business inside that. And we are creating a course, which we are sort of cheekily calling Finance for Poets, which is explaining the numbers bit of business to people who are not linear thinkers, who are not comfortable with the sort of the accounting language and business and model of thinking about accounting and numbers, but who want a more storytelling approach to it. And I call it cheekily Finance for Poets, but it's basically a way of explaining finance and giving a mental model to people who are natural and lateral thinkers and not linear thinkers.
Right.
And entrepreneurs tend to be lateral thinkers and not linear thinkers. So that's what I do.
Yeah. So in the work that you do, either both as an investor, as an advisor, if you think about business today, in the economy today, in the world today, are there any trends that you're seeing of what are the more successful business owners doing today that the less successful ones are not doing today?
That's a really good question. But I can only answer it by giving a fairly sort of 40,000 foot level answer, which will maybe too trite. I think as we've moved away from a supply economy to a demand economy, in other words, the first sort of, I don't know, 50, 60 years of the post-war economic world were dominated by supply. So if you could make stuff, if you had a factory, then you could pretty much determine how much you produce and therefore what your revenue is going to be. In the as distribution became digitalized and globalized, and the cost of capital sank, we moved dramatically from a supply economy to a demand economy. And the companies that didn't figure that out, who assumed that whatever they produced was going to get sold, just got wiped out and are still getting wiped out.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question is focus. Because there's very few points of leverage for production. It's changing slightly at the moment, but it's more or less true. We are in a hyper-specialized world in which if you don't know which problem you're solving and for whom exactly, and if you can't articulate it in the language of the people that you are purporting to build your business around, yeah, you don't have a cat in the house chance. Yeah. So the things that really good businesses are doing that distinguishes them from mediocre to poor businesses. They are relentlessly focused on defining their customer type and being hyper specific about the problem that they're solving. And if they do that, they can then charge premium prices. They then become outstanding in the sense that you can see them in the marketplace because they are doing something that is that they're going deep rather than broad. And they're not frightened of saying no to the wrong types of business. That allows them to increase their margins, double down, and go deeper and deeper. And it's a virtuous spiral that sets in. But most businesses don't have the guts to do it. They're terrified of specialization.
Certainly the ones run by older entrepreneurs. I would be in that demographic. Do you know, have you heard of a guy named Jim Blasingame?
No.
Okay. Jim, I think his nickname is the Small Business Advocate. He wrote a book 10 or 15 years ago that blew me away, and it was called The Age of the Customer, talking about how the power is going from the sellers to the buyers, which I think is very similar to what you're
it is. I mean, sellers are supply and buyers are demand. So yeah, it is.
And I've been saying for probably a good 10 years now that the way buyers buy has changed and continues to change. And that if you, Mr. or Ms. business owner, are not on top of that and figuring out how do I adapt my sales and marketing in such a way to match the buyer.
I could not be more in agreement with you on that. And you know, the huge thing that has changed is the role of sales. Sales used to be, you know, the first 60% of sales was explaining to the customer what we do, and this is our products, and here's our brochures, and this is. By the time the customer reaches you today, he knows all that.
All of that.
Because he's researched it. You know, he's got his assistant to pull it together. And if you're not supplying the customer with all that information digitally, and if you're not the trusted source that they are going to get that orientation, you're missing a huge opportunity because somebody else is doing it.
That's right. And their product could be half as good as yours, and they're going to win.
Right. Yeah. Which is all about content. It's about establishing expertise. It's about sharing stuff, and it's dramatically changing the sales process. Dramatically.
8 years ago or so, I'm here in New York, as you know. 8 years ago or so, a friend of mine said, "Look, a friend of mine owns, ironically, a very large staffing company. This company was doing 9 figures in revenue, and they're struggling." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Could you mind just going in and meeting with him and seeing if he can help?" So I said, sure. I met with the owner, and again, well-known business here in New York, maybe throughout the entire country. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, he showed me this huge room that he had for salespeople, you know, and a phone and a computer. And he said, "My salespeople are just they're not able to sell anymore." I said, "Well, what are you doing for marketing?" He goes, "I don't need marketing. I have a whole sales force." I said, and I tried to explain all of this to him. And he didn't buy it. And I went back to my friend who introduced me, and I said, I can't help this guy. I don't even know if they're still in business today. But yeah, companies that have not made that leap. To me, it's also a leap from sales to marketing, which I think is what you just said. So you still need salespeople, but marketing does a lot of the heavy lift, and those two are now intertwined more than they've ever have been.
The way the business development funnel has matured is entirely different. You don't need salespeople tipping prospects into the top of the funnel. That's right. What your marketing is there for. What you do need is a much higher level of qualification to underpin whatever expertise has brought them into the funnel in the first place,
right.
And then to help them on their journey to becoming customers.
Right.
So it's a different mindset, and I think there's a whole generation of people now who are really turned off by that old school type of selling because it just feels so irrelevant.
And used car salesman.
Well, the used car salesman, that's an interesting economic case of the used car salesman, and it has to do with customer loyalty over time. The reason that car salesmen used car salesmen have such a bad rap is because they don't care what happens the moment that they've closed the
It's all
sale.
about
You're
the
not going
transaction.
you're not going it's just about the transaction. So using understanding how long your customer relationship is going to be is going to depend on, do you want a relationship or is it just a transaction? And the used car salesman is right at the top end of the scale of one and done transactions. I mean, even brokers have learned that actually, it'd be quite a good idea to have people around for a bit longer,
Right.
rather than screwing them on the first trade.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears for a second, Stephen. And
Yeah.
you recently hired a Work Better Now remote professional, Maria Isabel, as they would say in Latin America. Tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like.
Okay. Well, firstly, the first thing I do every morning, because I have a little picture of you and Andy on my mantelpiece, I light a candle and thank you for.
I got to get a picture of that, but okay.
Yeah. Because that was without doubt the very best decision I've ever taken. Isabel has transformed my productivity and my life, and she is one of the most delightful human beings I've ever come across, and a consummate professional, a load of fun, and we just have it's just been a joy. Life has become so much easier since Isabel came into our lives. Yeah.
We are. I'm speaking on behalf of Andrew. We're thrilled to hear that. I mean, that is what we do. Our mission is to help people, and people as our clients as well as our talent, realize their dreams. So hearing that is really music to our ears. What has having Isabel enabled you to do?
He has massively expanded my understanding of what somebody who is highly qualified in the work of an assistant, of an executive assistant, is capable of doing. She hugely expand. I mean, she was so fast that when I started, I've been in business for, I don't know, 30 years, and I've had a secretary for at least, I don't know, 5/7 of that time, of one sort or another. And I've just never been very good at managing them, because I just, I've never really been very good at telling people, because I'm a very lateral thinker, putting in linear terms what it is that I want them to do. I've just found that. And one of my deep requirements was, I want somebody who knows how to do this job. I want somebody who knows how to do it so that I don't have to explain it, and they can then take their process and sort of fit me into it and sort of be gentle with me, but extracting the stuff that I want to do. And that has been a great learning process for me. We have a lot of discipline around how we communicate. She's very respectful of my time. She understands that as someone who spends a lot of time thinking and reading, I don't want to have my day filled with meetings. I need recovery time. She's very good at extracting just enough information to just get on with stuff. She's a trained psychologist. That's what her background is. She's also worked as an executive in an advertising agency, so she knows what project work is under pressure. And again, she's just expanded my understanding of what is capable of what somebody's capable of doing in terms of support, if they know what they're doing. And she's just a delight in every aspect, which is just really good. I enjoy working with her. She's intelligent, she's delightful, she's respectful, and she's just really good at her job, and is designing the job as she goes, from sort of chaos that I throw at her.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, as I said, we're thrilled that that's working out so well for both of you. Stephen, what do you like to do when you're not working?
Well, if you were to ask, if I would tell you, I read a great deal, and my family will say, "Well, you always read, so we can't tell whether you're working or not working." And that is true. That is true. I suppose the thing that I do most passionately when I'm not working, although I would also say that I get some of my best work done while I'm doing it, is walking. I do a lot of hill walking and long distance walking. Sort of, I go on 2 to 3 week 500-mile hikes somewhere with a backpack and a dog, and just do that, which is wonderful. I like sailing. I love cross country skiing. Traveling with my wife, love doing that. And we have 4 children. They're between the ages of 18 and 23 now. And when I look back on the last 23 years since they've been there, and I remember having this conversation with my wife when she was pregnant with James, our eldest, saying that we're making a deliberate decision to organize our lives around the family. So we were fairly sociable beforehand, and we became significantly less sociable, and deliberately so. Everything was there was a trade-off, and we want one that we wanted to make. So we never had the sense that I was losing out on anything. Quite the opposite. So I think if you're working a lot and enjoy your work, and you have a family and you want to be there for the family, that doesn't really leave an awful lot of time. Oh, and you need 8 hours sleep a day, which I do. And I take them and defend them with high aggression. I defend my sleep like because it's so precious. So once you've got those 3 parameters, there's not really a lot of time for doing very much else.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I myself have an Aura ring. My family makes fun of me because I learned after many years of not sleeping how important it is to protect your sleep. I'm really a different person. Thanks for sharing about that. Stephen, where can people find out more about you and Good and Prosper? Maybe you want to talk about Pitchfork for a second.
Yeah, papers. I do. So they can find us on goodandprosper.com, or they will be able to, because the site's just being redone, something that Isabella is doing a great job of reconfiguring. I suppose the most information you'll find about me and my work is on Substack, on our Substack page, goodandprosper.substack.com. I think I now have 220 essays up there written over the last 3 years. We recently went paid. I sort of churn out at least one a week on whatever interests me. I refuse to do what I tell businesses to do, which is you have to specialize and be absolutely focused. And I refuse to do that because I'm a generalist at heart, and I write on stuff that I feel like writing about. But that also gives you, I think, quite a good indication of how I think, which is interesting because that has had some business ramifications. I will have people who talk to me as if they know me. And I've never met them before, but they'll say, "Oh, I've been following, I've been reading. I love reading your essays. I've been reading it for the last year and a half or something." And that shows me the power of content in building relationships. Because if you're writing a letter every week and people are reading it, well, then after a couple of months, they really feel as if they know you, even if you don't know them at all. And that's such a great starting place for a relationship. And I would strongly advise every business to do some form of that, because you just don't know who is building a relationship with you while you're sleeping.
Right. That's great advice, whether it's written content or video.
Whatever it is.
I'll tell you, I get, and I know we're a little over time here, but I get when I'm thinking about doing business with a company and I don't see any information about the owners on their website. Forget about content. I'm just talking about, like, tell us a little bit about who you are, who's behind this. I immediately push that off.
Me too.
I need to understand a little bit about who we're doing business with. Yeah. Stephen, this has been a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing you. I guess it'll be in June in Princeton, with the gathering of giants. And thank you so much for spending a few minutes with the Work Better Now community.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final word is I am sending pretty much everybody I come across. I'm hooking up with your partner, Andy, because I just think everybody should have a Work Better Now assistant or support.
Thank you for that. Thanks. And
Okay.
I'll see you soon, Stephen. Thanks.
Take care. Thanks, Rob. Bye-bye.